It's Meir Weinstein. I'm joined with Meir Jolowitz. We're going to be discussing the meeting that's going to be taking place next week between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. They're going to be discussing a ceasefire in Gaza. They'll be discussing Iran as well. But there's a lot of information coming out fairly quickly about what this ceasefire in Gaza would mean. We're going to be discussing that right now. And I'm asking everyone who's joining, who's watching, if you could please share this on whatever platform you use, be it Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp groups, any of the social media channels. We'd appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people. Thank you very much. Meir, there's this meeting coming up next week between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. You know, already Jonathan Conricus has come out with a statement, and he said this is a victory for Hamas. Meir, we want to hear your perspective on this.
Just very quickly, Israel has a very troubled history where it wins military engagements, wars, and it subsequently loses the political debate after. The 1967 war was perhaps the greatest episode in modern Jewish history. And for 50 years after, 55 years after, Israel's been losing the political war that was a result of that incredible military biblical victory. What happened with Iran, Israel's destruction of the threat that Iran was, and by Iran, I mean its proxies as well. We're talking about Hezbollah, we're talking about Hamas, we're talking about the Houthis to a certain extent. We're talking about Israel's threat to Syria. Tremendous military victory, and yet as you look at it, it seems to be followed by political defeat. You're right about one thing. I mean, it's a tremendous, the contradiction is there's going to be a photo op, as you mentioned, Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump, and it's well-deserved. Donald Trump, you and I have said it both. Best president Israel's ever had, best president Israel is going to have. And yet, on that flip side of the coin, that contradiction, Israel is not being allowed victory. And I have often said, in fact, I'm doing a radio show this Sunday, and the topic of that show is that the only ceasefire we should call is a ceasefire to the ceasefires.
Right. Jonathan Conricus raised also that a handful of hostages, living and dead, will be returned.
Yeah.
But still, there will be a number of hostages that will not be returned. And not only that, but that Hamas will be given international guarantees, and therefore they remain there. And the food distribution will go through Hamas, i.e., UN channels, which are controlled by Hamas. So what will Bibi say when he ran on the platform, and in this war he said, we will not only crush Hamas, Hamas will not exist in Gaza anymore.
We're in a very difficult position. Bibi, who's finally acquitted himself as a prime minister because of the way that he's handled Iran and its proxies, and in great measure, we need to offer thanks and gratitude to Donald Trump, who's allowed Israel to fight the war that Biden and Blinken, that President Blinken would not allow in the Middle East. So we've got to be thankful for that. On the other hand, on December 3rd of 2024, after Trump was elected president, and before he actually was inaugurated as president, he promised that there would be hell to pay if Hamas did not release the hostages on January 20th. And they didn't. On March 6th, after he was already president, he said the same thing, that all hell would break loose if all the hostages weren't released. And here it is. We're coming on, and we're in the first week of July, and we're still talking about Hamas in 5 different segments, giving away 10, which would leave 10 living hostages still in their hands, and they're buying time. We're being played. And it's such a contradiction of terms. The same thing happened, by the way, and my problem is, and I want to say it in a few minutes that we're going to be doing here, I have a fundamental problem with what I've seen in the last 2 weeks. And that is the true advocates of a strong and secure Israel had always been against Israel offering a ceasefire that was anything short of the destruction of the enemy. No ceasefire, victory. And I could name them. And I'm talking about Trump himself, Bibi himself, Ron Dermer, Marco Rubio, Tzachi Negbi, all the people who had an interest in Israel said that this needs to be ended with victory. All of them were in concert in saying that a ceasefire, that means an end to the war prematurely, was not in Israel's best interest. They were all adamant about that. And yet everything changed. Whereas Israel had no intention of giving Hezbollah the ceasefire when it did in Lebanon, 3 days after it said that it was not going to give Hezbollah the ceasefire, it gives Hezbollah a ceasefire. November 23rd, November 26th of last year. The same thing happened with Hamas. Anyone who knew anything about Israel and its need to defeat Hamas and get the hostages back understood that humanitarian aid, that giving supplies, medicine, food, water, and electricity to Hamas was actually prolonging their existence rather than curtailing or ending it. We were all against it. And yet this week alone, Meir, all these people that I've mentioned before, these strong advocates of Israel, have appeared on television, have appeared in podcasts. Every one of them is actually thank Donald Trump because of the force of his personality and the government and the power that he has behind him was able to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza, as if it was a good thing. Well, gentlemen, only a few weeks ago and a few months ago, you yourselves knew it was a very bad thing. So there's been this fundamental change, this turnaround, this volte-face, which basically says that ceasefire is the way to end the conflict. And it isn't, as you mentioned at the beginning. It simply means prolonging Hamas's existence. And it also means, as others have said, they're talking about Egypt coming into Gaza. They're talking about the UAE coming into Gaza. They're talking about the fact that the Abraham Accords might extend to Indonesia or Malaysia. Who the hell needs Indonesia and Malaysia? We need victory, and we need Israel to have borders that aren't going to be penetrated by jihadist and genocidal enemies. That's what we need.
Absolutely. There was a report that came out of Saudi Arabia as well earlier today, and they said normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is contingent on the expulsion of Hamas.
Right.
So,
yeah. Listen, I mean, the Saudis certainly seem to have put lipstick on that pig. And the thing that I'm concerned about the Saudis, I said it a year ago, I wrote about it, maybe I think it's perhaps even 2 years ago. The Saudis have one interest, and that interest is getting a quid pro quo from the United States. They would make certain demands that they really didn't care about. And in exchange for dropping those demands, they wanted the United States to give them license and support, and in fact help in establishing what they call a peaceful nuclear program.
yeah.
That is the goal of Saudi Arabia. The Saudis don't give a damn about the Palestinians at all. What they care about is Saudi Arabia. And we have to be very careful. The other mistake that Trump has made, we've mentioned it on this segment that we've done before, and that is that Donald Trump, as good as a man he is when it comes to Israel, is naive. Donald Trump truly believes that Qatar is an honest broker in the Middle East. In fact, he actually said, without naming them, just 2 days ago, he said, we have a certain friend in the Middle East who I want to thank, who were able to negotiate this ceasefire in Gaza. He was talking about Qatar. He also gave them credit. He also gave them credit for having negotiated a quiet, not yet called a ceasefire, with Iran because of the relationship that they have. And, you know, people are praising Steve Witkoff. They're praising the Arabs, the Muslims know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. In the case of Hamas, militarily almost defeated, is buying time. And they're playing they understand that the United States wants to hear nothing more than we want peace from the other side. And the moment the other side says we want peace, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey are non-honest brokers. They are enemies of the state of Israel.
Yep.
And Bibi Netanyahu, as much as he's going to pose for this photo opportunity in Washington, and I'm glad that we see it, because we all know, you and I never failed to mention, what the alternative was before Trump was reelected. It was a disaster with Blinken and Biden. And what the alternative would have been today had Trump not been reelected. It would have been a disaster of epic proportions. So on the one hand, we're blessed to be where we are. But I go back to what I said a few minutes before. You cannot allow Israel's military successes be diminished by its political defeat, its political losses.
100%. One last point. Earlier, there was a statement from Hamas. They reject the ceasefire agreement.
Of course.
So, we can always count on them to.
Yeah. Allow me my last 30 seconds.
Yep.
There's a lot of confusing information. Israel said that they had destroyed a significant part of Iran's nuclear military capability. The IAE said that it's a number of news outlets said 2 or 3 months for them to recover. The IAEA said 6 months. Donald Trump said completely incomprehensibly a complete destruction. Yeah. And his own Pentagon came out today and said it was a setback of 1 year to 2 years. Right. Someone is wrong. Someone is definitely wrong. And the Pentagon, because they realized that they contradicted Trump's complete destruction, came out today and said, yes, as far as the significant damage, yes, it might be complete. The only thing I can say is, if we err on the side that is not to our best interest, we'll pay the price. We need to finish the job.
And hopefully what they're talking about also is supplying Israel with the B-2 bombers, selling them to Israel. So if Israel gets that, and bombs away.
Yeah. Meir, thank you again.
Job. Thank you very much, Meir. We'll do it again. Thank you. And might even do it just before the meeting that they have, or after the meeting that they have, which I believe is going to be on Monday. So once again, to our viewers, if you could please share this on the social media platforms that you use, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And we'll